A very good morning, and thank you so much for having taken the time to join the webinar today. So, today's webinar is on an interesting topic, probably more important than ever before, because we are at a point in time in history where things are changing at a pace than we've never ever witnessed before. Talk about international politics, talk about how companies are operating, talk about the mass layoff that's happening right now. Things are absolutely changing at a rapid pace. So, in today's webinar, I'd like to cover one topic, which is user lifecycle management and how does that translate to be a critical piece of your identity security story. So, that is going to be the approach for the rest of the presentation. By the end of the webinar, I hope you have probably one or two takeaways to go back, implement, and see how things change for good. Maybe if you're able to just streamline your identity and access management a little better than before, I'd be super happy about the whole participation. So, thank you once again. My name is Jay Reddy. I'm a senior technical evangelist at ManageEngine. And at ManageEngine, in the last 2 to 3 years, with the whole pandemic at play, we've been working with very many organizations across industries. Talk about education, banking, manufacturing, the whole portfolio of industries, and we've helped our customers and people with who we've been working essentially streamline their identity access management challenge. We kind of figured that halfway through the pandemic that the cybersecurity landscape isn't the same as how it used to be before. We started hearing a lot more about how organizations are being compromised actively because of their identity security posture. And with the whole pandemic accelerated digital transformation, I'm pretty sure you guys have helped your organizations scale, help your employees and members in your organization to be able to work remotely. For all of that to happen, every single time you had to get someone online, get them to connect to your systems remotely, you had to create an identity every single time. You had to provision accounts for them in applications that you never imagined they'd be using. Probably a whole lot of collaboration applications like Zoom, Slack, and the likes, and very many applications that were probably in house, stuff that were meant to be accessed by your employees from within your premise or within the boundary that we've all known for, your network perimeter. That changed rapidly, and it became all of a sudden your users are working from everywhere, scattered all over the place. They're operating at different work hours, and that kind of triggered a domino effect, I would say. And attackers have had a fun day since then. Now, attackers are trying to take advantage of the situation because your workforce is remote. The chances that something could go wrong and go unnoticed at the same time are absolutely much higher in terms of a remote working situation. So we keep hearing about that common problem today, which is cybersecurity problems essentially around identity security and identities being taken over. And any form of attack you see, 99% of them these days are some form of breach of a password or MFA not properly working or an account being taken over. And then from there on, you see how an attack progresses. And now when we are talking about zero trust, a concept that's been around for more than a decade but's gained a lot of momentum in the last 2 3 years, it becomes impossible to talk about zero trust without speaking about identity security. Now, the topic of today's webinar is chosen carefully to incorporate identity security in your day to day processes for identity access management. Now, when I say identity access management, you would talk about everything from provisioning a user all the way to deprovisioning them. I premised this conversation saying that there's a lot of change that's happening in organizations. We keep hearing about how the recession and the inflation and whatnot, and the global scenario is causing a lot of companies to lay off employees in bulk. Now, that's a very tricky scenario for administrators. It's not usually a happy moment for the company, for people working, for the administrators, because there's a lot of work that happens in the background. It's not a simple layoff. You don't fire people at will. There's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen right after a mass layoff happens. So we'll dive into that a little, take that direction, find out how identity security forms a key role in deprovisioning these users properly, and then the whole range of user lifecycle management and where we think a solution must essentially help you. We'll talk a little bit about identity attacks. Now, with the whole expansion of these identities and overnight digital transformation powered by this pandemic, the attack surface area obviously is bigger than before. I used to have probably 5 accounts for work, login in probably my email client, probably one of these collaboration applications, maybe my sales CRM and whatnot. And now I probably have access to 15, 20 applications, and I'll have to remember all these credentials. So it's making it all the more difficult. The users working remotely are going to end up not doing the best practice. They're probably going to set a weak password. They're probably going to use the same password over and over, exposing your organization and everything associated with the organization to an attacker or a threat. So it's become super easy for an attacker to get into your organization with the whole identity explosion that we keep hearing about. So that was one part of the story. That was the first part during the pandemic. And now people are leaving. That's the next part. How do I provision them was my biggest challenge until 6 months ago. How do I deprovision them has become my biggest challenge as of today. So we are talking about them. And since employees don't just access their said resources, they have privileges on your Active Directory, on your Office 365, and all of these data warehouses that I talk about have critical information, not just pertaining to your organization, but they obviously have information pertaining to your client data, your customers, and it becomes difficult. So we'll handle one problem at a time. When it comes to the whole great resignation that we keep hearing about, and the whole layoffs that we keep hearing about, deprovisioning employees is a tricky thing. For obvious reasons, people who are leaving the company may not leave the company in the best of terms. Probably they leave behind a backdoor access. Probably they set a simple email forwarding. You never know, right? You never really know. I mean, come on, that's the state of the situation, and we have to be a little cautious about what's happening around. And as much as we empathize, we should have a system in place that gets them offboarded in the smoothest way possible. So we are looking at that as a problem or a cue to the whole cybersecurity challenge that we're talking about. One of the things that we are observing recently is something as simple as someone plugging in a pen drive and trying to copy all the files before they leave. This is an usual case, be it the resignation or be it the layoff or any instance when someone's leaving. It's only natural that someone thinks probably they worked on a piece of information and they'd want a copy of it when they leave. So that's something that we're looking into as a common problem when we spoke to a lot of administrators. And then this in turn violates a lot of compliance regulations out there. You hear the GDPRs of the world and HIPAAs of the world and SOX and PCI and the fairly new ones like CCPA and whatnot. And it is a breach of compliance when you talk about identity access and how much do they have access on all these instances, and how do you ensure that only the right users have right access at a given point in time. So we are talking about a zero trust world. It will become almost impossible to enforce zero trust unless we have our identity in a safe place. And if you look at any analyst report that goes out month after month, the constant thing that they keep talking about, in fact, for that matter, Gartner, Forrester, anybody you take, it's about identity security. So boiling it down, it's a two-part story. One part of it is the governance aspect of it, where lifecycle management comes into the picture. How do I provision the users with the right privileges right from day one while they are in my organization, as they go through or graduate through their job, career, move between departments, move to a different geography, work out of a different office? How do I ensure that they get the right privileges and the privileges that are unnecessary get revoked? And then finally, when they have to leave the organization for whatever reason, how do I ensure that I have them revoked without a problem? Because the checklist when you onboard users is fairly simple. Probably you would have 10 items on your list, but then when you deprovision a user or an offboard a user, they've been in the company for quite some time. They've accumulated privileges over their tenure in the organization. And then when you deprovision, the checklist is much longer. And if you are to do it manually, it is almost impossible to get all of those out of the organization. So that becomes the challenge, and we should be looking at ways to incorporate an automation in place that can essentially do this due diligence for me and ensure that the reprovisioning is smooth. So, how do we look at it from a governance and administration standpoint? One easy or a well known approach is doing every aspect of your access management and privileges on, let's say, a file or a folder or a server done through roles. So look at role based access. that in turn boils down to another famous concept, least privileged approach. Now, people who follow zero trust would obviously relate to the whole least privilege approach. You grant privileges on demand only when somebody needs it. And if I can segregate it based on duties, even better. So you keep hearing the concept of micro segmentation when you talk about zero trust. At a network level, how do I ensure people accessing from this specific range of IP or this specific geography have access to a specific folder, file, or a workload? So that's how you go about doing it. And in the process, it's not a one time thing. You don't just enforce a policy of that sort and then leave it be. You'll have to look at complying, you'll have to look at auditing all of this continuously and reevaluate your posture every single time. So it has to be a continuous assessment of everything policy based, and these policies should be able to evolve dynamically. So far I've set the context for what we are going to get into. In terms of the lifecycle management itself, if I were to break it down, it's the user and their journey, the organization, and the policies or the privileges that they give them. In most cases, the problem begins right on day one when you hire people. If you do not have a system that's effective enough to, let's say, talk to your HRMS, onboard the users with a single click. I mean, that sounds absolutely like a fantasy, right? That's the kind of use case that we're looking at. We wouldn't want users to be onboarded to our systems manually. I don't want a request from the HR to onboard 100 users on Office 365, on business applications, on Active Directory, on Azure AD, and very many other places manually. So I will need to look at creating a workflow or orchestrate the whole process in such a way that right when users are getting onboarded, there's clear definition based on what department they're being onboarded into, based on where are they working from, based on who are they reporting into, based on what role or job title are they getting into. I should have a system or a framework in place that predefines to an extent with the level of customization you'd need to onboard users effortlessly from any target system for that matter. If you have a HRMS first approach, right when the HR makes an onboarding request, all the required data has to be fetched from the HRMS system. So you need to start looking for tools that can streamline that or talk to one another. So if you are an organization that primarily runs on Active Directory, you know for sure the challenge that I'm talking about. Doing it manually is almost next to impossible. You end up spending a lot of time. You could essentially use that time to probably battle a more important problem. But here you'll need to look at streamlining that aspect of it from a user onboarding standpoint. And when you're managing these identities manually, there are high chances that there might be some sort of the other error that creeps in. So streamlining that becomes a challenge. So that's the first part of the problem. So can I automate my identity lifecycle right from the word get go? So it obviously helps your new employees have a great first day or an onboarding experience because you've ensured you provision all the applications that they need. You've sent out an email saying, great, welcome aboard. ABCD are the applications to which you have access to. These are the levels of access you have. And then the respective manager has a view on what applications they have access to. The admin has access to how do they end up using these applications, what licenses do they need on a specific app, or what privileges do they need. So that in turn brings down my compliance problems considerably right from the word go. It manages, or it helps me manage any sort of access a little later much more efficiently. Likewise, the next part of the problem is being able to automate how do they go about accessing anything, any resource. If I can have a workflow in place where if it's a critical file or a folder for which they are requesting access, that's the obvious course, right? They're requesting access for something or the other. While working remotely or working hybrid, they'd want accesses to a lot more. From our study, after having spoken to very many administrators, folks in the cybersecurity, we are able to understand that users tend to hoard these accesses. They usually tend to get more access than they require, get access to applications that they'd never use. So you'll need to have an auditing system that's web-based, that in a click of a button shows you who's got what level of access in what application, do they need it or not. Such a sort of granularity is how you can look at your identity lifecycle from a re-provisioning standpoint for an existing user moving between departments and whatnot. And if you can do it all web-based, it makes a lot of sense and reduces the workload for an administrator from a management standpoint. So it brings me to the next part of the problem, which is integration with my HCM. Can I integrate my system, my IAM system, with, let's say, an Altipro or a Bamboo HR or a Workday or practically any other HRMS system for that matter to streamline my whole process? As a matter of fact, we've built such integrations here at Manage Engine. The rest of the presentation, I'll probably give you an insight as to how Manage Engine IGA tool called ADManager has been helping organizations. Now, in terms of our HCM integration, we extend a little beyond just HCM. We have a REST API integration. We have an Open API integration with all these existing vendors, and then out of the box integrations with a bunch of them. If you have your own system, by all means, please do bring them and you can have them associated. How does it relate to a business use case per se? Right when you configure, you'd be able to specify intelligently which user from which department needs to get what levels of privileges across the board. So it's that simple, and I'll be able to customize the whole onboarding experience, which makes a great impact on your employees right on day one. And also, like I mentioned earlier, it also helps me have a clear picture at any given point in time, be able to create users in bulk, modify them in bulk, modify or change their attributes in bulk whenever there's a change. So since my identity management system and my HRMS system is in sync, all that a manager has to do is a line manager for that matter. Let's say somebody from a product team or a marketing team would want to make a change request. They have a new joinee from another team. So it'd be as simple as making the request on the HRMS. The request gets translated all the way to your identity platform and then to the target applications that you'd want them to have access or not have access to, and revoke any unnecessary access that they may have. So that brings me to the whole idea of orchestrating and how do you go forward with orchestration. Now, as simple as it may sound, identity access management historically has become more complicated day in, day out. But if you were to break it down one level further, you would want to look at securing these identities as they go forward. So, right when a user gets provisioned, look for options to enable something as simple as MFA, right? If you are probably, let's say, an Office 365 organization, I'd probably want you to do this for your existing users, for your existing Office 365 infrastructure. If you want to evaluate what's your security posture and whether your Office 365 is configured in the right way, there's a simple experiment that you can do. All you'll have to do is open up another window, search for Secure Score dashboard, and you'll be surprised by the kind of insights that you already have readily out of the box from your Office 365 instance. Now, when you get to the Secure Score dashboard of your Office 365, just Google or look up Secure Score. You'll be able to get or access your dashboard, and it'll give you list of action items to implement in your organization for your employees, for your security posture. And if you look at it, right on top of it is multi-factor authentication. So if you can have your identity system to enable MFA for your users with the set of privileges, or with whichever MFA method you want your users to use, be it Face ID, Touch ID, or OTP, or any of that sort, you should be able to do it, and that can streamline your whole user onboarding and security at the same time in one go. So going forward, there are a bunch of repetitive tasks that keep happening, right? There are these reprovisioning activities where somebody is going to make some request to a file folder or a group. You should be able to manage and monitor that as well. If that can also be orchestrated based on rules, based on workflow and approval, nothing better than that. So we are looking to do that streamlining end to end from a permissions management standpoint, from a privileges standpoint. And major cases for identity lifecycle management are obviously provisioning and deprovisioning. The flow diagram right here just walks you through as to how ADManager, the Manage Engine IGA solution, can help streamline the whole onboarding and offboarding experience. So if you look at it, let's say there's a HR request for an employee creation for a specific company. A request is made in the HR application, a bunch of locations to choose from. Let's say they're working out of the US. The HR marks that in the system. It fetches based on a criteria or a rule. Based on whatever department or any other pivot you set, the system will be able to proactively go on, assign the right Office 365 licenses, create a mailbox if they need, access or grant access to enterprise applications, give them a single sign-on portal, have access set up for self-service in case they need any password management actions or want subscriptions to a group membership or whatnot, and also set up MFA in the course. And the best part is the icing on the cake is to send out a welcome email saying everything is ready right on day one. Similarly, the last part of it during deprovisioning, when a request is made on the HRMS platform, the list is much more longer. Accounts have to be removed, licenses have to be revoked, exchange mailbox has to be deleted if needed or backed up, or if there's probably a litigation going on, put on litigation hold. In all of these cases, the permutations and combinations, the respective managers being notified, members being notified, devices being unassigned, help desk tickets being resolved, licenses being removed, access being removed from a file server. This is a very elaborate list, right? When you do it manually, it's almost impossible to get everything done in one go. So the system looks into all of these, connects with all of these systems that are pertinent to your organization, and does that. Now, when your employees move across your infrastructure, by which I mean to say maybe they're bringing their own device, connecting to your network, accessing these applications on different times of day, accessing different services, downloading maybe a file, accessing another data format, whatnot, or sharing something over Office 365, Microsoft Teams, you would need a holistic view of whatever is happening. So, in association with the orchestration that we do, if you can also report into all of this, get notified if there's a risky behavior that's going on, that's where it really counts. So identity lifecycle management is no longer just a matter of getting the logistics of it right, just provisioning, deprovisioning, and going forward. It very much is also about identity security. And we are looking to build with our existing customers, we put together an orchestration flow that's smart in terms of understanding where or what decision needs to be made. If it's a request coming in from whichever stakeholder for that matter, what action needs to be taken is pegged against historical data. So there's some level of identity intelligence that we're talking about, as how we are looking to see probably in 6 months' time, we are intending to roll out identity intelligence full blown. So every single time when a request comes in, and you are on the request thinking whether to approve it, deny it, or change it, you'll have a prompt that will say, all right, for a user belonging to the finance department with this role and job title, this doesn't seem to be an appropriate access that you should be granting. And then the orchestration will step in, it will notify you, it'll tell you or help you run an access certification campaign if need be. So all of this can be automated in different steps for different parts of the life cycle. So it does make the life of an administrator a lot more easy. Cutting down manual work associated with identity lifecycle management is the ultimate goal. And in terms of the approach itself, if we can hook into other systems that you have, maybe your help desk system, let's say if you're an existing managing customer, if you're using Service Desk Plus, or if you're using ServiceNow or one of those big names for help desk, we'd be able to integrate with your help desk tickets and help you act from your existing system. Or if you're having a simple password reset request, let's say it's a very basic Active Directory or identity management problem that we have, users forgetting their passwords and making requests for password resets. It's a pesky problem that we all handle. And with a simple webhook, an integration that's out of the box, we can connect to your system and help you resolve that specific problem or use case right from your help desk. So the ideal intention is, right after you install this tool, we not want you to use the tool day in, day out, logging into our tool. Rather, from wherever you are, if you are accessing it from a service desk, a help desk administrator should be having the right privileges and delegated that level of power to make such changes when needed. So that is the idea, and we do it effectively across a range of applications. And that's something that you need to consider when you are implementing an identity management solution in place. So the webhook integration is pretty straightforward. You can select, choose templates, use the orchestration to go forward, have this set up in one go. So the bottom line is, if you are putting together an identity access management solution, consider your identity fabric. There's a bunch of data that comes in from different sources. You talk about data access governance, you talk about privilege access management, you talk about identity threat response and detection. So these are all terms that analysts like Gartner and Forrester love propagating. And then it makes our life a little difficult and easy at the same time if we have an understanding of what these are, and if you can look at a solution that can operate from not just an identity management standpoint, from a security standpoint, it saves a lot of trouble. We've got enough data to prove that major problems, all the GDPR violations, or most of them that happened in the recent past, were because of some form or the other compromise in identity or identity security. So, what do you do? Simple takeaways I'd give you are to put together a system in place that can streamline your entire user lifecycle management right from the word go. If you can streamline it all the way till deprovisioning them, you'd be better off. Have MFA implemented for your identities. If you can microsegment your workloads or your network, it would be even better. If you can have it attached to your identity system, if you can analyze their behavior, have a user behavior analytics in place, generate reports or get alerts when there's a deviation in behavior, even better. If you can have an identity intelligence system in place that prompts you when the right access needs to be given or revoked, great. If automatic access certification campaigns can be run, that's wonderful. So you will be covered on most grounds of data security, and by default you would be compliant to very many regulations, following best practices like NIST and whatnot. And if you can have out of the box reports for cases such as who's got what privileges, whose passwords are about to expire, what accesses to specific groups need to be removed, are there any stale accounts or inactive accounts in my organization, when I have to deprovision, can I get the whole checklist checked out? So if you can do these in one go with your identity lifecycle management tool or IAM tool or IGA tool, that's the kind of tool that you'll need to be looking at. We've been helping very many organizations across the globe, essentially with your identity challenge the last 15 years. We've got some fair understanding of how these use cases evolve and how are they industry specific. Education is a different story altogether. Getting students from one department to move to another department, or attending a specific semester or a specific courseware, or K to 12 moving or graduating from one class to another, all of this has to be taken care of for education. Similarly, for finance, BFSI, who's got what privileges? How do I ensure file security, data security at the word go? Is all of it related? And can I have a single dashboard where all of these data get populated from a security aspect? Do I have risk assessment in my system that can tell me who are the riskiest users who are most likely to be compromised? Whose behavior is abnormal? When are they accessing it at a different time of day when they're not supposed to? Such details will make all the difference. So my suggestion to you is to start moving in that direction. If you are looking at zero trust, look beyond identity access management, find out solutions that also help you do ITDR, threat response and detection, and user behavior analytics. So that will be a couple of takeaways that I'll want you to have today. You've been such a lovely, lovely audience. Thank you so much for patiently tuning into the session. I've got my email ID right on the screen. I wanted to pack in as much information as possible in the 30 minutes I had. I'd love to talk to you over email, or you can give me a call if needed. I'd love to connect. All right. You've been a lovely audience, and thank you so much for your time. Bye bye.